They slid the envelope across the table like it was a dinner roll. Not with two hands, not with respect, just a quick shove, paper scraping my lace tablecloth like I was nothing more than an old receipt they were tired of keeping. I stared at my name typed in cold black ink. Final notice. My fingers went stiff around my teacup. The tea had gone lukewarm, but I kept holding it like it could keep me steady, like warmth was something you could borrow. Before I begin, if you care about stories like mine, please like this video and subscribe. It means more to me than you know. I'm not saying that for the numbers. I'm saying it because I've lived a long time, and some nights it helps to know someone out there is listening. The dining room smelled like roasted chicken and cinnamon bread, the kind of Sunday meal I used to make when my children still ran into the house calling my name like it was a safe place. The kind of meal that once meant family, now it just smelled like something being served up to cover a truth. My son, Darren, didn't meet my eyes, not once. His wife, Lydia, kept her lips pressed into that tight little smile people wear when they're doing something they don't want their face to confess. And my granddaughter, Mina, sat there twisting a napkin in her hands, blinking fast like she wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. I opened the envelope slowly. The paper inside was crisp, too clean, too official. The words didn't make sense at first, like my mind was refusing to translate them. Failure to vacate, property transfer, 10 days? I read it again and again. My breath came out thin, shaky, like it got caught on every syllable. Darren, I whispered. My voice didn't sound like me. It sounded like a woman I didn't recognize, small, unsure, embarrassed in her own home. What is this? Lydia reached for the serving spoon like she was changing the subject. It's just paperwork, Mama June. Don't make it dramatic. Don't make it dramatic. That's what they tell you when they're doing something cruel, and they don't want to hear it called what it is. I turned to Darren, my only son, the boy I held through fevers, the boy I fed when we were broke, the boy I prayed over when he left for college with holes in his socks and dreams in his eyes. His jaw tightened. He cleared his throat, still staring at his plate. "Mama," he said finally, "we need to talk about the house." The house. My house. The one I paid off with aching knees and double shifts at the nursing home. The one where my late husband's laugh still lived in the hallway. The one with pencil marks on the pantry door showing how tall my babies grew each year. I felt the room tilt just a little. Outside, rain tapped gently on the window like it was trying to warn me. Inside, silence sat heavy between us like wet laundry, cold, clinging, impossible to ignore. And then Lydia said the words that made my heart crack clean down the middle. "We didn't think you'd fight it. We thought you'd understand your time is passing." I stared at her. I stared at my son. I stared at the paper on my plate like it was a death certificate. And in that moment, I realized something I never wanted to learn at 71 years old. Someone in my family had been planning my ending without me. But that was only the beginning. People like to call me strong. They say it the way you say a chair is strong, because it holds everybody up and never complains. But strong doesn't mean unbreakable, and it surely doesn't mean you deserve to be used until your legs splinter. I kept that paper in my lap while dinner continued like nothing had happened. Lydia passed the peas. Darren asked Mina about school. The fork scratches and gentle clinks filled the room, trying to pretend we weren't sitting in a moment that could change my whole life. I didn't taste a thing. My mouth was dry, like fear had soaked up every bit of moisture I had left. All I could think was, how did we get here? Because I wasn't always an old woman in the way. I was a mother who carried a whole family on her back. I met my husband, Earl, at a church fish fry in 1977. He was tall, quiet, and he laughed with his whole chest. I married him 2 years later in a simple cream dress my sister helped sew. We didn't have much. We had a used couch, a second-hand table, and love that felt like a warm blanket. When Darren was born, I felt like the world finally had a center. Earl held that baby like he was holding hope itself. We bought this house when Darren was 5. Small, but ours. Yellow paint, white porch swing, a backyard Earl swore he'd turn into a garden. Life wasn't easy. Earl's hours got cut, my mother got sick, Darren needed braces, and the world kept asking for more. So I worked. I worked until my feet felt like stones. I cleaned houses in the morning, I did nursing shifts at night. Sometimes I'd come home and soak my legs in hot water while Darren slept, and Earl would rub my shoulders whispering, "One day, June, one day we'll rest." But Earl didn't get that one day. He died in his sleep 12 years ago, just like that, gone before the sun came up. The morning after the funeral, Darren stood on this very porch and promised me, "I'll take care of you now, Mama. I won't let you be alone." I believed him. I believed him the way only a mother can, wholehearted and foolish, like love is a contract nobody would dare break. After Earl passed, Darren moved back in for a while. He said it would help. He said the house was too big for me. Then Lydia came into the picture. She was pretty, polished, always smelled like expensive perfume and peppermint gum, the kind of woman who doesn't like old things, old furniture, old stories, old people. At first, she called me Mama June with sweetness in her voice, but over time that sweetness turned to impatience, like every breath I took was a small inconvenience. Still, I tried. I cooked her favorite meals, I watched Mina when they wanted date nights, I handed Darren money when he was short, because a mother's heart doesn't like seeing her child struggle, even when her child is grown. And slowly, I stopped noticing how much I was giving, until that night at my dining table with that envelope on my plate, when I realized I had been pouring myself out for people who had started to see me as an obstacle. I wanted to ask, "Did you ever love me?" But the words stuck in my throat like dry bread. Instead, I folded the notice carefully, like it was something delicate, and I said softly, "What did you do?" Darren finally lifted his eyes. They were wet, but not the right kind of sorrow. And he said, "Mama, it's complicated." What came next shattered everything I believed. Complicated is a word people use when the truth is ugly. Darren rubbed his forehead like he had a headache. Lydia sighed like she was the tired one. Mina stared at her plate so hard I thought she might burn a hole through it. I sat up straighter even though my back wanted to fold. I wasn't going to crumble in front of them, not at my own table. "Tell me plain," I said. "I'm old, not stupid." Lydia's smile flickered. "We're not trying to hurt you." And I swear that sentence felt like a slap made of air, not pain in my skin, pain in my pride. Because if you have to say you're not trying to hurt someone, it usually means you already did. Darren finally spoke. "When Dad died, you put the house in a trust, remember?" I nodded slowly. Of course I remembered. Earl had always said, "June, protect the roof over your head. People get funny when money is involved." I had gone to a lawyer. I signed papers. I thought I was being wise. Darren continued, "You made me the successor trustee." My stomach tightened. "So I wouldn't have to worry," I whispered. He swallowed. "Yeah, so you wouldn't have to worry." Lydia leaned in, voice smooth as syrup. "And you don't, Mama June. We're just organizing things." Organizing things? Like my life was a closet they wanted to clean out? I shook my head. Then why do I have an eviction notice in my lap? Mina's eyes filled with tears. She looked at me like she wanted to speak, like she had a secret lodged inside her chest, but Lydia shot her a look, sharp, quiet, and Mina's mouth closed again. Darren's voice dropped. We refinanced. The room went cold. I blinked. Refinanced what? The house, he said. We needed money. I felt something heavy settle in my stomach, like a stone dropping into a well. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just whispered, "You used my house?" Darren's shoulders rose and fell like he was drowning in his own choices. It was supposed to be temporary. Lydia's business needed a push. We had debt. The rates were... Lydia cut in quickly. Darren did it to keep us afloat. Don't make him the villain. I looked at her then, really looked. Her nails were done, her hair was smooth, her necklace sparkled like tiny ice, and I realized she didn't look like a woman afloat. She looked like a woman who had been enjoying the ride while someone else paid for the boat. My hands trembled. I tucked them beneath the table so they wouldn't see. "How much?" I asked. Darren hesitated. "How much?" I repeated louder. He whispered, $120,000. My chest tightened so fast I had to inhale twice to get air. $120,000 against my home? Against the last thing Earl left me? I thought of all the nights I skipped new shoes, all the times I stretched a pot of soup for 3 days, all the prayers I whispered over bills, and my own son had signed my safety away like it was a casual favor. I pressed a hand to my sternum, trying to keep my heart from bursting out. "And now?" I asked. Lydia's voice turned firm, almost annoyed. "Now the bank wants payments, and you know you don't really have income like that, so we made a plan." A plan. I waited. Darren's voice cracked. "We're selling the house, Mama." I stared at him. Selling the house? Like it was a couch, like it was nothing sacred. "And where am I supposed to go?" I asked. Lydia answered before my son could. "We found a nice senior apartment, smaller, easier, and we'll take care of things from there." Take care of things? I realized in that moment they weren't trying to help me, they were trying to remove me, and my granddaughter's tears told me she had known longer than I did. I leaned forward, voice barely above a breath. "Mina, what aren't you telling me?" Mina's lip quivered, and Lydia's eyes turned to ice. But I had no idea what truth was waiting for me. Mina's hands shook so hard her fork rattled against her plate. The sound was small, but it echoed inside me like a warning bell. I knew that shake. That's the shake of a child carrying something too heavy. "Mina," I said gently, the way I used to when she was little and scared of thunder. "Baby, tell Grandma." Lydia's voice sliced through the air. "Mina doesn't need to be involved in adult matters." Adult matters. As if stealing someone's home is a grown-up decision a child shouldn't witness. But Mina lifted her eyes to mine, and in them I saw fear and guilt. She started, then swallowed hard. "Grandma, I didn't want it. I tried." Darren's gaze tightened. "Mina," but I held up a hand. "Let her speak." For the first time that night, my voice had a firmness that surprised even me. Mina took a shaky breath. I heard Mom talking on the phone weeks ago." Lydia straightened. "Mina, that's enough." But Mina kept going, tears spilling now. She said Grandma doesn't need the house anymore, and that if you didn't cooperate, she had paperwork to prove you were not stable. I froze. Not stable? The room blurred around the edges. I gripped the edge of the chair like it could keep me from sliding out of reality. What
paperwork?" I asked, voice thin. Mina wiped her face with her sleeve. "Mom had you sign something, remember? When she said it was for your medical records?" My stomach dropped. I remembered. A month ago, Lydia came to me with a folder, all neat and professional. She said she was helping organize my documents, just in case. She told me it would make things easier if anything ever happened. I signed. I didn't even put my glasses on. Because I trusted my family. Because I wanted to believe my son had chosen a woman who wouldn't harm me. My hands went cold. "Lydia," I whispered, "what did I sign?" Lydia's smile didn't reach her eyes. It was just a standard power of attorney. Power of attorney. Those words felt like chains. Darren stood up quickly. "Mama, it wasn't like that. We weren't trying to." But my heart was pounding too loud to hear him. I looked at Lydia. "You were going to say I'm not stable?" She shrugged like it was common sense. "Mama June, you're older. Things happen. Memory slips. You forget names sometimes." I stared at her, stunned. I forget names the way every human does. I misplace my keys. I repeat stories because I love the memories. And she was turning normal aging into a weapon. I felt humiliation crawl up my throat like bile. My own son sat there while his wife planned to paint me as confused. That's not just betrayal. That's erasing. I swallowed hard. "Darren, did you know?" Darren's eyes darted away. That answer, avoiding, hit harder than any word. I stood up slowly. My knees ached. My hands trembled, but I stood. "For years," I said, voice shaking, "I thought love meant enduring, being quiet, being useful, being easy to live with." I turned my gaze from Lydia to Darren, "and I will not be erased in the home I built." Darren's voice cracked. "Mama, please, we can talk." And that's when Lydia said something that showed me exactly who she was. "If you make this difficult," she said softly, "you'll embarrass yourself." Embarrass myself. As if my dignity was something she owned. I felt my throat tighten with tears I refused to let fall in front of her. So I picked up that eviction notice and I folded it again, neat as a church fan. And I said, "All right." They blinked, because they thought all right meant surrender. But what I meant was, "All right, I see you now." And as I walked to my bedroom that night, with rain tapping the windows and the hallway lights humming softly, I realized I had one choice left. Either I let them bury me while I was still breathing, or I dug up the truth myself. But that was only the beginning.
Sleep didn't come, not even a little. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe, old pipes ticking, wind brushing the porch rail, rain whispering against the glass like a prayer. And in the quiet, I heard my husband's voice in my head, clear as if he was sitting beside me. "June, protect the roof." My chest tightened. I got up. My feet touched the cold floorboards, and for a moment I just stood there in the dark, holding myself like I might fall apart. Then I went to the closet. Under the bed, tucked far back, was a shoebox Earl and I used to call our just-in-case box. I hadn't opened it in years. My hands shook as I slid it out. Dust puffed into the air. The lid creaked like the house itself was trying to stop me. Inside were old papers, insurance forms, deeds, receipts, things that prove you lived a life. And there, folded neatly, was something I didn't expect, a copy of the trust documents. I sat on the edge of the bed, the lamp casting a soft yellow circle around me. My hands looked old in that light, veins visible, skin thin, but they were steady now. I read the papers slowly, line by line, and the more I read, the more my stomach churned, because the trust was clear. So clear it was almost cruel. The house was in the trust to protect me, but Darren, as successor trustee, had power,
too much power if he could claim he was acting in my best interest. That phrase, in my best interest, suddenly sounded like a trap. I went to the kitchen for water. The floor felt colder than usual. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had. Each second felt like it was counting down to something. I sat at the table again, alone now, and I thought about all the little moments I ignored. Lydia insisting on handling my mail. Darren asking questions about my bank account just to help. That time my Social Security deposit didn't show up for 2 days, and Darren told me it was probably a processing issue. I had trusted them, and trust, I learned that night, is a soft thing, easy to tear. I opened my purse and pulled out my checkbook. It felt silly, old-fashioned, but I still balanced it the way Earl taught me. My eyes moved over the last few months. Withdrawals I didn't remember, transfers I didn't authorize, payments marked business expense. My chest tightened. They weren't just taking my house, they were draining me. I stood up and walked to the phone on the wall. Yes, the old one, the kind with a cord, the one Earl installed himself. I held it like it was a lifeline. Who do you call when your own child becomes the problem? I thought of church friends, I thought of neighbors. Then I thought of someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Mrs. Hattie Bell, the retired paralegal down the street who used to bring pound cake to every funeral and knew everyone's business without ever sounding nosy. I dialed her number. It rang twice. Then her voice came through, sleepy but sharp. "Who is this calling at?" "Hattie, it's June." Silence. Then, "Baby, what's wrong?" And something in me broke, not into pieces, but open. I told her everything. The notice, the refinance, the power of attorney, Mina's confession. Hattie didn't interrupt, she just listened. And when I finished, her voice turned low and serious. "June, do not sign one more thing, and do not leave that house." I swallowed hard. "What do I do?" Hattie paused, then said, "First thing tomorrow, we're getting you your papers, and then, baby, we're going to find out what they've been hiding." I gripped the receiver so tight my knuckles hurt, because deep down I already knew. There was a reason Lydia was rushing this, and the reason was probably sitting right beneath my feet in my own home. I had no idea what truth was waiting for me.
Morning came gray and wet, like the sky was mourning with me. I didn't sleep more than an hour. My eyes burned, but my mind was sharp in a way it hadn't been in a long time. At 9 a.m., Hattie arrived with her umbrella and her serious face. She walked into my kitchen like she'd been invited by God himself. "Sit," she told me gently, "and bring me everything you've got." I laid out papers on the table. The eviction notice, my checkbook, the trust copy, the folder Lydia had given me. Hattie put on her reading glasses and began. Her finger moved down the pages slowly. And then her face changed. Not surprise, recognition, like she'd seen this kind of mess before. "June," she said softly, "this power of attorney, it's not limited. It's broad." My stomach twisted. "That means," she continued, "they can act like you in a lot of ways." I felt dizzy. I put both hands around my mug of tea, even though I hadn't drank any. The warmth was just something to hold. Hattie flipped through bank statements and made small notes on a yellow pad. Then she pointed to one line. "This transfer here, and this one, and this one." My voice came out barely. "What about them?" "These went into an account you're not listed on," she said, "but I recognize the bank." I blinked. "How?" Hattie leaned back, eyes narrowed. "Because Lydia's cousin used to work there, the one who got fired for questionable practices." I swallowed. My heart started to beat faster, like it was chasing a truth it didn't want to catch. Hattie tapped the table. "June, we're going to the bank, today." I hesitated. "Darren will find out." Hattie's eyes softened. Baby, he already knows. You're the last one they expected to wake up. That sentence sent a chill through me. We went. The bank smelled like floor polish and cold air conditioning. The lights were too bright. Everything felt too clean for the dirty thing we were uncovering. Hattie spoke calmly to the manager, using words I didn't even know. She asked for identity verification, requested copies, demanded timelines. I sat in the chair like a child in the principal's office, my hands folded, my heart shaking. After 30 minutes, a young employee returned with a folder and apologetic eyes. "Mrs. Carter," she said quietly, "there have been several authorizations under your name." My throat tightened. "But I didn't—" "I understand," she said, voice gentle. "That's why we're concerned." She showed Hattie the forms, and my stomach dropped, because the signatures looked like mine. Not perfect, but close enough. The curls of letters, the slant. Someone had practiced my name. I felt humiliation flood my body hot and fast. My own family, rehearsing my identity like a role. Hattie's face went hard. She asked, "Do you have surveillance footage?" The employee hesitated, then nodded. "We keep it for 90 days. We waited while they pulled it up. Time moved slow, like the air was thick. Then the screen came on, and there she was, Lydia, standing at the counter in a beige coat, smiling politely like she belonged there. And beside her, Darren, my son, my baby, my promise. He stood there, nodding, handing over papers, watching her sign my name. I felt my whole body go cold. I couldn't hear anything for a moment, just a ringing in my ears like my soul was screaming. Hattie put a hand on my shoulder. "June." But I couldn't speak. I just stared at that screen and watched my son betray me in bright fluorescent light like it was nothing. And that wasn't even the worst part, because as the footage rolled, Lydia leaned in and said something to the teller. The teller laughed, and Darren smiled. He smiled, like my life was a joke. I pressed my palm to my mouth to keep from making a sound. My tears didn't fall at first. They just sat there, heavy behind my eyes, like they didn't know where to go. Hattie's voice was low. "We're taking copies of everything." I whispered, "Why would he do this?" Hattie didn't answer right away. Then she said something that turned my blood to ice. "June, I don't think this was just about money." What came next shattered everything I believed. On the way home, the rain was steady. Not storming, not dramatic, just a quiet, constant falling, like the world was weeping without needing attention. My hands rested in my lap, still as stone. I kept seeing Darren's smile on that screen. Not a forced smile, not a nervous one, a comfortable one, a settled one, the kind you wear when you believe you're right. Back at the house, Hattie made me sit down before I collapsed. She poured me fresh tea and slid it toward me. "Sip," she said, "just sip." But even the smell of chamomile made my stomach turn. "I raised him," I whispered, voice breaking. "I've raised him better than this." Hattie's eyes were gentle. "Sometimes, baby, we raise the body, but the world raises the hunger." I shook my head. Why? Why would he help her do this? Hattie opened the folder again and pulled out a different paper from the bank packet, something attached, something I hadn't noticed. She pointed to a line. My eyes followed, and my breath stopped. It referenced something called Estate Advance Agreement. I blinked. What is that? Hattie's mouth tightened. It's when someone borrows against an inheritance they expect to receive later. The room tilted. "Inheritance?" I whispered. Hattie nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." My fingers trembled. "But Earl didn't have—" "Not like that." Hattie stared at me for a long moment, then asked softly, "June, did Earl ever mention a second will?" A second will? My throat tightened. No, he had one will. We made it together. Simple. House, savings, life insurance. That's it. Hattie nodded, but her eyes said she wasn't convinced. Then she stood and walked to my living room bookshelf. Earl's old Bible still sat there, worn leather, corners soft, pages highlighted with his careful hand. Hattie lifted it gently like it was sacred. She opened it and shook it, and an envelope fell out. My heart stopped. I stared at it like it was a snake. The envelope was yellowed, old, tucked away like something meant to be found only when it was too late. My name was written on it in Earl's handwriting. June, only if I'm gone. My hands shook so badly I could barely open it. Inside was a letter, and beneath the letter was a document, a will, not the one I knew, a second will. My lips parted, but no sound came out. I read Earl's letter first. His words were steady, loving, and heavy. He wrote that before he died, he discovered something about Darren, something Darren begged him not to tell me. Earl wrote that he kept it secret to protect my heart, but he also knew truth doesn't stay buried. He wrote, "If you're reading this, June, it means someone is trying to move you out of your own life." My breath caught. He knew. He knew. My eyes fell to the will, and that's when the real shock hit. Because Earl had left the house, not to Darren, he left it to me for life, and then, after me, he left it to someone else. Not Darren, not Mina. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone Darren hated the mention of. My chest tightened. I whispered the name written there. Calvin. My older brother's son. My nephew. The one Darren called a troublemaker. The one Lydia said wasn't family material. Hattie's voice was soft. "June, your husband protected this house from your son." My hands flew to my mouth. Tears spilled now fast and hot. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Lydia wasn't rushing to sell because she wanted a new house. She was rushing because the house was never truly Darren's, and if I passed away, the property would legally belong to Calvin, not them. They weren't just removing me, they were racing against time. I clutched Earl's letter to my chest, sobbing quietly like my grief finally found its voice. "My God," I whispered, "they were trying to get ahead of the will." Hattie nodded slowly, and in the silence that followed, with rain tapping the windows and my tea untouched, I realized something terrifying. They weren't only stealing, they were panicking. And people do dangerous things, not violent things, no, but desperate things when their plans start to collapse. I had no idea what truth was waiting for me next. That afternoon, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear exactly, from waking up. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to being naive. You can't go back to smiling politely while somebody steals your dignity. Hattie sat across from me like a guard dog. "You need legal help," she said, "and you need someone you can trust." I stared at the name in Earl's will again. Calvin. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 7 years, not since the family fallout. Darren blamed Calvin for everything back then, said he was jealous, said he was always after money. But now I wondered if Darren had told me that story for a reason. I picked up my phone. My fingers hovered over the keypad. What if Calvin hates me? What if he thinks I chose Darren over him? What if I'm too late? Hattie leaned forward. "June, you don't have time to be proud." That stung, but it was true. So I dialed. It rang once, twice, then a cautious voice answered. "Hello?" My throat tightened. "Calvin?" Silence. Then, "Auntie June?" The way he said my name sounded like he was holding his breath. I swallowed. "It's me." A pause, then softly, so softly, he said, "I didn't think you'd ever call." I closed my eyes. The guilt hit me like a wave. "I should have," I whispered. "I should have a long time ago." He didn't argue. He just let that truth hang there. Then he asked, voice careful, "Are you okay?" I laughed, one small, broken laugh that didn't sound like joy. "No, baby, I'm not." And then I told him. Not every detail, not yet, but enough. The eviction notice, the refinance, the forged signatures, the power of attorney, the footage, and finally, Earl's second will. Calvin didn't interrupt, but I heard his breathing change. Sharper, angrier, hurt. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Auntie, I tried to warn you." My eyes flew open. "Warn me?" Calvin exhaled. "Years ago, when Uncle Earl got sick, he asked me to come over. He told me he found out Darren had taken loans in his name. Small ones, credit cards. He confronted Darren. My stomach turned. Calvin continued, voice tight. Darren cried, swore it was a mistake, swore he'd fix it, and Uncle Earl, being Uncle Earl, wanted to believe his son. My hands trembled harder. "Then why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. Calvin's voice broke just a little. "Because Darren told everybody I was lying. He said I was trying to split the family. He said you'd never believe me anyway." A tear slid down my cheek. Because I knew he was right. I had believed Darren's version without even asking. I had been loyal to my son, and that loyalty had cost me years of truth. Calvin said, "Auntie, listen to me. Don't leave that house. Don't sign anything, and don't let Lydia control your mail or your phone." I stared at the window, watching rain streak down the glass like slow tears. I whispered, "They're my family." Calvin's voice turned gentle but firm. "Auntie, blood isn't always love. Sometimes blood is just what somebody uses to get close enough to hurt you quietly." That sentence sat inside me like a stone. Then Calvin said something that made my stomach drop again. "And, Auntie, there's more." My breath caught. "There's a document Darren filed 2 months ago. A petition." My throat tightened. "A petition for what?" Calvin paused, then said slowly, "To have you declared incapacitated." I froze. My heart cracked. I couldn't even speak. Calvin's voice sharpened. "They were going to take your rights, Auntie. Not just your house, your decisions, your accounts, your life." My palms went cold. I whispered, "My God." And in that moment, I understood the opening hook wasn't just humiliation. It was a warning. Because if that petition went through, I would legally become a guest in my own body. I looked at Hattie, who was listening with her eyes wide. Hattie mouthed, "We fight," and Calvin on the phone said the words that finally lit a fire in my bones. "Auntie June, if you're ready, I'm coming tomorrow, and we're ending this." But that was only the beginning. They expected me to fold. They expected me to cry, apologize for being difficult, and pack my life into boxes like it was clutter. But the next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened every curtain. Sunlight spilled into my house like truth. I dressed in my best simple cardigan. I put on my pearl earrings, the ones Earl bought me after our first anniversary, when we had barely enough money for groceries, but he still wanted me to feel cherished. I brewed fresh tea, not because I was calm, because I wanted my hands steady. Hattie arrived early, carrying a folder thick enough to be a weapon made of paper, and at 10:17 a.m., Calvin pulled into my driveway. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. He was older than I remembered, broader shoulders, a little gray in his beard, but his eyes were the same, soft when they looked at me, like I was still the aunt who used to sneak him extra pie. He stepped inside and hugged me gently. I broke. Not loudly, just a quiet release in his arms. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He held me tighter. "I know." Then he pulled back and looked at my face. Really looked. Not at wrinkles, not at age, at pain. "He did this," he said softly. I nodded. Calvin's jaw clenched. "Then we do what Uncle Earl asked us to do." We sat at the living room table like it was a courtroom. Hattie laid out the documents, the bank footage screenshots, the will, Earl's letter. Calvin had brought an attorney with him, Ms. Renee Walters, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice that felt like a locked door. At noon, Darren and Lydia arrived. They didn't knock politely. They walked in like they owned the place. Lydia's heels clicked on my hardwood floors. Tap, 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 like she was stamping out my last bit of authority. Darren looked nervous. Lydia looked annoyed. And Mina looked ashamed. Lydia's eyes swept over the room and landed on Calvin. Her smile tightened. "Oh, so he's here." Calvin didn't blink. "Yes, I'm here." Darren's eyes widened. "Mama, what is this?" I kept my voice steady. "This is a family meeting." Lydia laughed, short and ugly. "For what? To guilt-trip us? Because we're trying to help you?" Ms. Walters slid a document forward across the table. "Mrs. Carter doesn't need your help. She needs you to stop committing fraud." The word hung in the air like smoke. Darren flinched. "Fraud?" Hattie spoke calmly. "We have bank footage. We have forged signatures. We have transfer records." Lydia's face went pale for a brief second, then hardened again. "That footage proves nothing." Calvin leaned forward. "It proves you used her name like a costume." Darren looked at me, panic rising. "Mama, please, you don't understand. It wasn't—" I held up my hand, and the room went quiet. I looked at Darren, my son, my first baby, my heartbreak. "I understood every sacrifice I made for you," I said softly. "I understood every sleepless night, every extra shift, every meal I skipped so you could eat." My voice shook, but I kept going. "What I didn't understand was why you thought my love meant you could take my life from me." Darren's eyes filled with tears. "Mama." But Lydia cut in quickly, voice sharp. "Don't manipulate him. You're making him feel guilty." Ms. Walters opened her folder. "We're not here for feelings. We're here for facts. And factually, you filed a petition to declare Mrs. Carter incapacitated." Lydia froze. Darren's mouth fell open. "How do you—" "Because," Ms. Walters said calmly, "you filed it in a public courthouse." Mina's breath caught. "Dad!" And Darren's face, his face crumpled because suddenly everyone could see him, not as a son, as a man who had chosen convenience over conscience. I watched him break, and I didn't feel victory. I felt grief, because it shouldn't have come to this. But then Lydia stood taller and said the one thing that proved she never loved me at all. "She's old. She'll forget this in a week. She won't even make it to court." Silence. The kind that stings. I looked Lydia in the eyes and whispered, "You are wrong." And that's when Ms. Walters slid one final paper forward. A legal notice, a restraining order request, and a fraud report. She said, "You have two choices. You sign an agreement today reversing every transaction and relinquishing control, or we go to court and let the judge read every single detail." Darren stared at the paper like it was poison. Lydia's lips trembled, and Mina started crying quietly. I took a slow breath, because this was justice. Quiet, steady, undeniable. But I still didn't know how far Darren and Lydia were willing to go, and that terrified me. What came next shattered everything I believed. Darren's hands hovered over the pen like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Lydia whispered fiercely, "Don't you dare!" Her voice was low, but I heard it. That kind of whisper isn't love. It's control. Darren's eyes flicked from Lydia to me, and for a moment, I saw something shift. Not courage, not yet, but awareness, like a man waking up and realizing the bed he's in doesn't belong to him. "Mama," he said, voice cracking, "I didn't mean for it to get this far." I swallowed. "But you let it." The words came out soft, not cruel, just true. He wiped his eyes, embarrassed. "I was trying to make everyone happy." I stared at him. "You can't make a thief happy, Darren. They don't want happiness. They want access." Lydia stood abruptly. "Excuse me, who are you calling a thief?" Calvin didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. A person who takes what isn't theirs. Lydia turned on Darren. "You're going to let them talk to me like that after everything I've done for you?" I watched her, and I finally understood her game. She didn't love Darren. She loved what Darren could sign. Darren's shoulders slumped. "Lydia, stop." Her eyes widened. "Stop?" He looked down at the documents again. His jaw trembled. Then he whispered something I never expected to hear from my son. "I'm tired." The room went still. He looked at Lydia with wet eyes. "I'm tired of lying. I'm tired of pushing my around. I'm tired of pretending this is normal." Lydia's face twisted. "So you're choosing her over me?" Darren's breath shuddered. "No, I'm choosing what's right." Lydia let out a bitter laugh. "What's right? You wouldn't even be here without me pushing you." And then she said something that Mina gasped. "You know why I married you, Darren? Because you were easy." Silence. Mina covered her mouth. Darren blinked like he'd been hit by truth, not hands. Truth is enough to knock a person down all by itself. Lydia grabbed her purse. "Fine, choose your old mother, but don't come crying to me when you regret it." She turned to leave, but Miss Walters spoke calmly. "Before you go, you'll sign as well. You're named in the filings." Lydia froze. Her eyes darted around like a cornered animal. Then she snapped. "This is harassment." Hattie's voice was steady as stone. "No, ma'am, this is consequence." Lydia's hand shook as she signed. Darren signed too, hands trembling, tears falling quietly onto my table. Mina sobbed softly. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I reached across the table and held her hand. "Baby," I whispered, "you told the truth. That's how healing starts." Darren looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as a provider, not as a convenience, but as a mother. "I ruined everything," he whispered. I shook my head slowly. "No, you revealed everything, and now you'll have to live with what you did." He bowed his head, crying in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child, and I felt it. Karma. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. The kind that arrives like sunrise, quiet but unavoidable. But even with signatures on paper, I knew something else was coming, because people like Lydia don't accept losing control easily. And the truth was, we still hadn't faced court. But that was only the beginning. Court isn't like television. There are no dramatic music cues, no perfect speeches. There's just fluorescent lights, hard benches, and the quiet hum of strangers waiting for their turn to be judged. 2 weeks later, I sat in that courtroom wearing my pearls and holding Earl's letter in my purse like a prayer. Darren sat behind me, alone. Lydia sat across the aisle with her lawyer, eyes narrowed like she could still intimidate the world into bending. Mina sat beside me, holding my hand so tightly my fingers went numb. Ms. Walters did most of the talking. She presented the footage, the forged forms, the transfer trail. She presented Earl's second will, and then she presented the petition Darren filed to declare me incapacitated. The judge, a woman with tired eyes and a voice like firm ground, looked down over her glasses.
"Mr. Carter," she said to Darren, "do you understand what you attempted to do to your mother?" Darren's voice was barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." "And why did you do it?" Darren swallowed hard. "Because I was afraid of losing the house." The judge's face didn't change. "Your mother is not a house," she said. "She is a human being." My throat tightened. Those words, they healed something in me I didn't know was still bleeding. Lydia's lawyer tried to argue misunderstanding, tried to call me confused, tried to say I was emotionally unstable, but Ms. Walters calmly asked me one question. "Mrs. Carter, do you know where you are right now?" I lifted my chin. "Yes, ma'am. I'm in Charleston County Court, and I'm fighting for the life I built." The judge nodded like she respected that. In the end, the court dismissed the incapacity petition. They froze the accounts, they ordered repayment, they issued protections. And just like that, without applause, without fireworks, the law did what my family refused to do. It acknowledged my humanity. Outside the courthouse, the wind was cold. The sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Darren approached me slowly. His eyes were swollen. "Mama," he whispered, "I'm sorry." I studied him, and I realized apologies don't erase harm. They don't rebuild trust overnight. They don't return lost years. But they can be the first brick in a long road back if the person is truly willing to walk it. I nodded once. "I hear you." He flinched. "That's it?" I shook my head softly. "That's what you get today, because today I choose peace." Mina hugged me tight, crying into my shoulder. "Grandma, will you ever forgive us?" I kissed her forehead. "Baby, forgiveness is a garden. It grows slowly, but I'm willing to plant the seeds." Lydia walked past us without a word, jaw clenched, eyes burning. And as she stepped off the curb, her heel snapped, just like that. Small, but it felt symbolic, because karma doesn't always come as thunder. Sometimes it comes as a tiny crack that reminds you, nothing built on cruelty stands forever. I went home that day and stood in my doorway, breathing in the smell of my own house, old wood, clean soap, and the faint trace of Earl's pipe tobacco that never really leaves. I touched the doorframe, and I whispered, "I'm still here." But the story wasn't finished yet, because the hardest part wasn't court. The hardest part was learning to live after betrayal. And I had no idea what truth was waiting for me in my own heart.
A month after court, I sat on my porch swing with a blanket over my knees and a cup of tea between my palms. The air was crisp, leaves scraped softly across the sidewalk like whispers. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked and a child laughed. Normal life. It felt strange to return to normal after your world has been rearranged. Darren moved out. He said he needed to figure himself out. I didn't stop him. Mina still comes by twice a week. She helps me in the garden. We talk slowly, carefully, like we're rebuilding something delicate from the pieces. Sometimes she apologizes again. Sometimes we sit in silence and let the quiet do the work. Because healing doesn't always come from words. Sometimes it comes from presence. Darren has called. He doesn't demand anything anymore. He just checks in. He sounds smaller, older. One day he said, "Mama, I didn't realize how much I used you." And I told him the truth. "I didn't realize either," I whispered, "because I thought being needed meant being loved." That's the trap many women my age fall into. We grow up thinking sacrifice is the same thing as respect. We grow up thinking endurance is the same thing as devotion. We grow up thinking our job is to hold the family together even if it costs us our dignity. But here's what I learned the hard way. Love that requires you to shrink is not love. Family that needs you powerless is not family. and anyone who can steal from you with a smile never saw you as a person in the first place. I still grieve. Of course I do. I grieve the son I thought I had. I grieve the safety I thought was guaranteed. I grieve the years I spent excusing what should have been confronted. But grief isn't the end of a story. Sometimes grief is the doorway, because on the other side of it, I found something I forgot I was allowed to have: self-respect. And one more thing, Earl's letter. I keep it in my Bible now, not to live in pain, but to remember I was loved truly by at least one person who saw my worth and tried to protect it. And maybe that's the moral I want to leave you with today. If you are an elder, if you are a mother, if you are someone who has poured yourself out for your family, do not confuse your kindness for your duty. You can love your children without handing them the keys to your life. You can forgive without surrendering your safety. You can be warm and still have boundaries. Because boundaries are not bitterness. They are wisdom. And if someone tries to make you feel guilty for protecting yourself, that's proof you needed protection all along. So if you're sitting somewhere right now with your own version of an envelope on your plate, some quiet humiliation, some hidden betrayal, hear me. You are not too old to fight for yourself. You are not too late to reclaim your dignity. And you are not wrong for wanting peace. I learned that the hard way, and I survived it. And if you made it to the end of my story, then maybe you needed to hear it, because sometimes the greatest justice isn't seeing someone punished. Sometimes the greatest justice is simply this: you still get to live on your own terms. But even now, when the porch creaks in the wind and the house settles at night, I still remember that envelope sliding toward me, and I whisper to myself, thank God I didn't stay asleep, because that paper on my plate was the moment my life began again. And that is the truth.